Daf Tzadi Ches Amud Aleph will begin Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis, the Mishnah towards the bottom. Zok the Mishnah, if a person who is reading from a sefer of Kisvei Kodesh on a skupa threshold, now initially we're assuming that this skupa is a Rishus HaYachid. So as we'll see in the Gemara and the Mishnah, that there's a street and there's a threshold, which is an elevated area, so it's like a porch, and then there's a house behind it. So we're assuming, though, at this point, that the street is Rishus Harabim, and the threshold is elevated, it's 10 Tfachim or more higher, it's Dalet by Dalet, so it's Rishus HaYachid. If he's reading from Kisvei Kodesh on it, B'nisgalgal Seif Miyodim, and one end of the sefer rolled from his hand and it landed in the Rishus Harabim below. Goydel Esla, he can roll it up to himself. Now, even though he's rolling it, that one end is resting in the Rishus Harabim, and he's bringing it to the Skupa, which we're assuming at this point is the Rishus HaYachid, so he's bringing from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid, which is, of course, Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid is a malacha, but over here, since he's holding one end of it in his hand, so midaraisa, there's no malacha, it's not a malacha of hachnasa or haitzah, unless you bring the entire chayfetz. And here he's holding one end of it in his hand, only the other end is resting on the street, so there's no Isser D'Oraisa. Now normally there would be an Isser D'Rabbanan, but here, Mishum Kavod of the Kisvei Kodesh, we're matir and we allow him to roll it towards him, to roll it up. So we have a similar case, which seems to be the same, but we have a different halachs over here. Here we have a machlekes. So we'll see in the Gemara what's the difference between the two cases. If he was reading on top of a rooftop, which is a Rishus HaYachid, then his galgal sefer biyoda, and one end of the sefer, the Megillah, rolled down, and it's now rolled down towards the Rishus Harabim. If it didn't reach 10 tfachim, it's not within 10 tfachim of the ground, meaning, so therefore, it's in the airspace not of the Rishus Harabim, it's in the airspace of a Malkim Patur, then we say he can roll it up to himself. But if it's within 10 tfachim of the ground, so it's in the airspace of the Rishus Harabim. Now over here we say differently than we said in the Reisha. We say over here, he does not roll it up to himself, he turns it over. He turns it over so the written part is not exposed, it's not facing the public. He turns it to the other side so that it's concealed, it's covered by the wall, and what's facing the public is the blank side. So he minimizes the bezoin of the Kisvei Kodesh. So that's what he does. Rav Yehuda says, no, even if it is within 10 tefachim of the ground, even if it is within 10 tefachim of the Rishus Harabim, and it's in the airspace of the Rishus Harabim, still you can roll it up. You roll it up to himself, even if there's only the maloi machat, only the thickness of a pin separating it from the ground, you can still roll it up to yourself. Then we still say, then you go to Esla. But which implies that if it's landing on the ground, if it's resting on the ground, then you cannot. Rav Shimon says, I feel he says, even if one end of it is resting on the ground, you can still roll it up to yourself. Even though one end is on the Rishus Harabim, and he is on the Rishus HaYachid, you can still roll it up to yourself. Because as we said, since he's holding on to one end of it, then picking up and bringing the other end of it to him is not a malacha d'oraisa. It's a d'rabbanan. And since here we're faced with the bezoin of Kisvei Kodesh, there we say we allow you to roll it up to yourself so that there should not be a bezoin Kisvei Kodesh. So we have to see what is the difference between the Reisha, which we say does not seem to be a machlekes, which we say that in the Eskupa, even if it landed below, you can roll it up, and the rooftop, we say on the rooftop that we have a three machlekes of where you can roll it back to yourself or not. So, what are the circumstances of this skupa? What are we talking about? But if you're telling me that it's 10 or more tefachim high and it's dalet al dalet, so therefore the threshold is arishus hayochin, the kama rishus harabim, and the area in front of it is rishus harabim, and v'loy gazrina dilanov vasula suya, and we're not geyser that he might fall, and he might then pick it up from the ground and bring it to him. Meaning, even if the scoop is a rishus hayochin, as long as he's holding on to one end, there is no malacha in rolling it and bringing it to him, because he's not bringing the chayfetz completely. But if you tell me that the Reish is talking about a scoop of the Rishus Yochid, nevertheless, we're not even geyser. And we're not geyser in this case that it might fall from his hand. And then he might pick it up from the street and then bring it to the eskupa. Now, if you were to do that, that would be bringing it from the street, which is the Rishus Harabim, and bringing it in to the Rishus Yochid, which would be a Malach D'Oraisa. But maybe perhaps you're telling me that that's the eskupa, and we're not geyser in this case. Money. So who's the Tana? Who's this Tana? It must be Rav Shimoni. Damar called Darshim Mishum Shvus Eina Aimed B'fnei Kisvei HaKodesh. It says that anything that's Mishum Shvus, which is an Isur Rabbanan, it does not stand in the way of Kisvei HaKodesh. Meaning, just like we had in the second case of the Mishnah, by the case of the Gag, that Rav Shimon says, even if one end of the Sefer rested on the ground, you can roll it up, because we're not geyser the Gzeira because of the covet of the Kisvei Kodesh, that should so that the Kisvei Kodesh should not be mutal b'zayin. Well, if the Reisha is talking about in the skupa of a Rishus HaYochid, then essentially it would seem to be that the two cases are the same. Therefore, the ratio that permits you to bring it up, even if it fell on the ground, would seem to be exclusively the shlit of Rav Shimon, only the shlit of Rav Shimon. I am a sefer. The next case in the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda by the case of the rooftop. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if it's resting within a thickness of a pin, you can roll it up, but not if it rests on the ground. And Rav Shimon and Rav Shimon says, even if one end of it is resting on the ground, you can still roll it up to you. So you'd have to say, according to this explanation, Reisha was say for Rav Shimon, that the Reisha is Rav Shimon. And the next case in the Mishnah, the Sefer is also, and the Sefer rather, is Rav Shimon. And it's also in the middle case is Rabbi Yehuda, which is something that's very unusual. You'd have to say, according to this, that the first case of we're talking about the Eskupa is Rav Shimon, only Rav Shimon, because the other two Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda and the Sam Tana, would be arguing on that. And then you'd be saying that the next case by the Gag, so first it brings in the opinions, two other opinions, and then it brings Rav Shimon. So it would be very unusual to be talking about the sheet of Rav Shimon, go and mention the sheet of Rav Yehuda, and then mention Rav Shimon. Amar Rav Yehuda says, even though that's not normally what we find in the Mishnah, but he says, in Reish of a Sefer Rav Shimon, we see also Rav Yehuda. That's what we'd have to say. We'd have to say that the Reisha and the Sefer is the sheet of Rav Shimon. And the Mitzvah also, where it talks about that it was galgal from the rooftop, and there it interrupts the Shita of Rav Shimon and brings in Rav Yehuda. Rabba says, no, this is a different tense. Rabba Amar HaChabi Skupan addresses Askina. There's a basic difference between the two cases. Yes, both cases, he says, agrees that we're talking about the Skupas of Rishus HaYochid. So the Skupas of Rishus HaYochid and the Gag is Rishus HaYochid. However, the case of the Eskupa is where it's in the path of the public, where the people pass by and people walk upon it. So it's used by the public. It has the halacha of Rishus HaYochid, but it's used by the public. So therefore, halacha by Eskupa addresses Askinan, where the Eskupa, there's traffic that walks on it. Umishum bizoyin kisvei kodesh rabbanan. Here, there's a greater amount of bizoyin, since it's in public and the public uses it, and to see that the sefer is just lying over there and exposed, there's more of a bizoyin. So over here, they were mekel. Meaning, even though Rav Yehuda holds that if it's on the ground, we don't allow you to bring it up where it's on the rooftop, and the Stam Tana of the Mishnah says that even if it's within 10 of the ground, we don't allow you to roll it up. But over here, where it's in a skupa on the dresses, there's a greater degree of bizoin, of kisei kodesh. Therefore, they would allow it. So therefore, the reish is not only Rosh Shimon, it's L'kuli Alma. And therefore, the Mishnah is not splitting up. It's not Rosh Shimon, Rav Yehuda, and Rosh Shimon. The reish is L'kuli Alma. Esa Abai asked Kashan Rabbah, how can you say that we're talking about in the skupa of Rishus HaYachid? We learned in the Brisa, Teich Dalet Amos, if the safe, you have the skupa, if it fell on the street within Dalet Amos of the skupa, then you can roll it up to yourself. But Chutz LaDalet Haikhamsa, but it fell beyond that. Dalet Amos more further away, so it's on the street further. Dalet Amos are more further than the skupa. Then you can't roll it to yourself. You turn it over. Your Haivcha Aleksav. You turn the written portion. And you turn it over so it's not exposed. Now, skupa in the dresses askinan. If you're telling me the skupa is a rishus hayochid, it's just that it's public, but it's in fact a rishus hayochid. Mali teich dalet amos, mali chutz l'arba amos. What difference does it make if it's teich or chutz the dalet amos? It should make no difference. Meaning, what's the point of dalet amos? The point over here would be that if there is a possibility for one to come lidei in isur deraisa, then we would not allow you to roll it to yourself. If we're not concerned about an isur deraisa, then we would allow you to do it. Now, if it's dalet amos away from the skupa, there's a concern that it might fall and he might bring it to himself and he'd be carrying dalet amos in the rishus harabim, which is an isur deraisa. So therefore, if it falls, the one end of it falls, dalet amos or more, further away beyond the skupa, there is that chashash, the possibility that he'll be maver dalet amos rishus harabim, and therefore it's also to bring it to himself. But if it's in dalet amos, therefore we don't have that concern, and therefore you could roll it to yourself. Now, if we're talking about the skupa is a rishus hayochid, what difference does it make? What difference does it make whether it's dalet amos or not? You still have the possibility and the concern that he might pick it up from the rishus harabim, bring it to the skupa, which is a rishus hayochid, and he'll be over the isur deraisa. So if the skupa is a rishus hayochid, you have that concern in any event, whether it's within dalet or beyond dalet. So doesn't that show you that the skupa cannot be talking about in a skupa which is a rishus hayochid? Now, Taisus points out over here that this kasha really is a kasha not only on Rabbah, that it's also a kasha on the terrace of Rav Yehuda, that Reisha Rav Shimon, and that the Reisha is Rav Shimon, and the Sefer is Rav Shimon. You could have the same kasha, that how could you say that, even if you're saying according to Rav Shimon, what difference does it make if it's toich dalet or chutz dalet? So it must be that the skupa is not talking about an skupa of a rishus hayochid. It's just the reason we ask the kasha on Rabbah is because we're dealing with Rabbah's teretz, so it's the question is directed to Rabbah. But really, it's a kasha on Rav Yehuda as well. So therefore, Abai says no. The case is we're talking in a different case here. Elamar Abaya hachabe skupa karmelis haskinan. What we're talking over here is where the skupa is a karmelis. It's not a rishus hayachid. It's not 10 tvachim high and dalet al dalet. It's not a rishus hayachid. The rishus harabim averes lefaneh, and the rishus harabim passes in front of it. So therefore, teich dalet amos, if the sefer falls within dalet amos, therefore there's no concern about being maver dalet amos of rishus harabim, and since the skupa is a karmelis, there's no carrying from the rishus harabim to rishus hayochid, it's only a karmelis. So the isurim over here involved, the potential is only for an isur derabbanan. So therefore, it won't come to a chiv chatas and it's deraisa, sharle rabbanan, they allowed him to roll it up to him. Chutz la'arba amas, but if it's 4 amas away, the maisla asli dechi of chatas, But if it's 4 amas away, where there is a possibility that he'll be maver dalet amas or Rishus Harabim, there is a possibility that he'll be over the deraisa, leishar le'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan did not permit it. So therefore, according to Abaya, we understand that the difference between the Reish and the Seifa, we understand the chilek between them. The Reish, in the case of the Eskupa, is talking about Eskupa's Carmelis. And therefore, it's Lekuli Alma, and Rabbi Yehuda would agree, it's not only Rav Shimon, it's Lekuli Alma, that since it's a Carmelis, and if it's within Dalet Amas of the Eskupa, then everyone would agree that you're allowed to roll it and bring it to yourself, because there's no potential for an Isser D'Oraisa. The second case of the Mishnah is talking about a Gag, which is a Rishus HaYachid. Over there, we have the Machlekes. There's a Machlekes over here, the Gan Yaakov and Rabbi Kiva Eger. So the Gemara says if it's Chutz La'arba Amas, if it's 4 Amas away, then we're concerned that he might come and bring it, and he'll be Oiver, be Maver Dalet Amas of Rishus Harabim, and be Ha'oiver and Isser D'Oraisa. The Gan Yaakov said, well, that would only be talking about if he brings it Dalet Amas and he stops, and he's Oimed Lafush before coming into the Carmelis. Because in order to be Chayev, be Maver Dalet Amas of Rishus Harabim, you need Nakira, then you have to carry a Dalet Amas and stop. So even there, it would only be the Isser D'Oraisa if he stopped and was Oimed Lafush before bringing it into the Eskupa. Otherwise, you wouldn't have an Isser D'Oraisa. In any event, you wouldn't have an Isser D'Oraisa. But Rabbi Kiva Eger also, no, you don't have to have the Hanacha in the Rishus Harabim. The Hanacha itself could be even outside the Rishus Harabim. But as long as it was carried through the Rishus Harabim, even if the Hanacha was outside, you'd still be Chayev. So it means over here, literally, that if it's Chutz L'Arba Amas, the Mais law, if you brought it into the Eskupa, and even if you did the Hanacha in the Eskupa, you still would be Chayev in the Isser D'Oraisa. So that's how Abaye understands it. Frek the Gemara, Yachi. Well, if that's the case, the way Abaye says it, Tzayich Dalet Amas Nami, why are we geyser, even if it fell within Dalet Amas of the Eskupa, we should also be geyser, because an Eskupa is a threshold, it's like a porch in front of a house. So Nigzer Dilma Mile Mishus Aram Rishus HaYachid, why are we concerned that he'll bring it from the Rishus Harabim and just walk through the porch, the threshold, and bring it into the house, and it'll be over bringing it from the Rishus Harabim to the Rishus HaYachid? Maybe you'll say, Kim, the Masechet is Carmelis Leslin Ball. Maybe you'll say, no, there is no Isser D'Oraisa in this case, because between the Rishus Harabim and the Rishus HaYachid, it's separated by this Kupa, which is a Carmelis, so he's not bringing it directly from the Rishus Harabim to the Rishus HaYachid. So maybe you'll say, there's no Isser D'Oraisa. No, that's not so. Rava says, if a person is Maver Chayfetz, Dalet Amas Rishus Harabim, he brings it from beginning of 4, and he now passes, he takes it 4 Amas in the Rishus Harabim. V'avir derech halav, and he, even if he carried it, and he now lifted it high, he lifted it over, he picked it up and lifted it high so that it's more than 10 tvachim above the ground. So it's in the airspace of a Malkim Patur. He's chayiv. He's nevertheless chayiv. So you see, even if he picked it up in the Rishus Harabim, he started walking with it, he lifted it up, so it's walking through the airspace of the Malkim Patur, and then he put it down Dalet Amas later. That's still called being Maver Dalet Amas Rishus Harabim, even though it was interrupted by a space which is a Malkim Patur. Here also, if he picked it up in the Rishus Harabim and he carried it into the Rishus HaYachid, even though he carried it through a Carmelis, so it wasn't brought in directly from the Rishus Harabim to the Rishus HaYachid, it was carried through the Carmelis. So long as he did not stop in the Carmelis, he'd be chayiv. So therefore, why aren't we concerned that there is still, even if it fell within Dalet Amas of the Eskupa, there still is the potential for a Chiyuv Chatas, for an Isser D'Oraisa? More answers on Chamayaskin and Veskupa Ruka. We're talking where the skupa is very long, so there's quite a distance between the Rishus Harabim and the Rishus Hayachid in the house. In the interim, he'll remind himself, and therefore remind himself that he cannot bring it into the house. So there's enough time to think about it, to remind himself, so therefore we're not concerned. We could be talking even where it's not a ruk. And stam kisvei kait, we're not concerned that he'll pick it up and without stopping, bring it directly into the house. Because kisvei kaidesh, you pick it up, you look into it, you stop, you look into it, and you see what's written there. So Minastam, he will have stopped before bringing it into the house, and therefore he will not be bringing it directly from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid without breaking it up, without an interval, without stopping in the interim. And if he stops in the interim, then he is not chayv, because he'd be bringing it from the Rishus HaRabim to the Askupa, which is a Carmelis, which is not a deraisa, and then from the Carmelis to the Rishus HaYachid, which is not a deraisa. Yes, he might stop, but how do you know he's going to stop in the Carmelis? How do you know he's going to stop in the Askupa? Maybe he's going to stop on the street. And from that point, he will take it directly from the street into the house. Mora says, Hamani in a Chanami. But we're going over here according to Hamani ben Azahi. We're going according to the Shita ben Azahi. That's not why we're not going. He says that a person, that if he's walking, it's considered like he's stopping at intervals. It's considered like every step that he takes, it's like he stopped. So therefore, if you have a Carmelis, you have the Askupa that's separating the street and the house, when he walks, even if he does not physically stop on the Askupa, on the threshold, but Ben Azai holds the very act of walking is considered to be stopping. So therefore, if there is a Carmelis, there is the Askupa that separates the street and the house, therefore it's considered like he stopped on the Askupa, on the Carmelis, and therefore he did not bring it from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid. Well, that's fine if he's walking, but maybe he'll just take it and throw it into the house. And if he throws it into the house, it's not considered to have stopped on the Eskupa. He's might have been that we don't say that it's considered to have stopped. So if he threw it from the street and it passed over the Eskupa into the house, he would be chayiv. So why are we not concerned, even if it falls within Dal and Amas of the Eskupa? But why aren't we concerned that there's an Issur D'Oraisa? If we allow him to roll it to him, perhaps it'll fall, and he'll come and throw it. In the case, he'll throw it into the house. It shows you that we're not allowed to throw Kisei Kodesh, and therefore we're not concerned about this scenario. Because you're not allowed to throw the Kisei Kodesh, so we're not concerned he'll come and throw it into the house. So therefore, if it's within Dalet Amas of the Eskupa, there's no Maver Dalet Amas B'Shus HaRabim. And we're not concerned that he'll come and bring it from the street to the Skupa, because that's a Derabanan, that's a Rishus from to Carlos. He might bring it into the house. We're going according to Ben Azai that says that Mahalach is Ka'imidami, and it's considered like he had stopped on the Skupa. The Mishnah continues, says Hayakari Beresha Gag. The next case is if he's reading on a rooftop. The rooftop is a Rishus HaYachid. Umishori, so it says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you turn it over on the side. Is that permitted? Valtanya is the people who write, the Seifrim who write, the Kisei HaKodesh, the Sefer Torah Tzilam Mezuzahs, Lo Yitirim L'Hafach Yiri Al Paneha. You're not allowed to turn the area of the parchment and turn it over and face down. If you want to cover it, you have to take a garment and cover it, but you're not allowed to turn it over. It's a bizayin for the Kisei HaKodesh to turn it over. More answers in a chanami, but there's where you have a possibility. You can take a garment and cover it. But over here, we're talking where you can't cover it. There wasn't a large enough garment to cover it, or it wasn't a garment that would be able to cover it and remain there, and they cover it that way. So this is the only option you have. And if you would not turn it over, yes, it's true that turning it over is a bezoin for kisvei kodesh, but not turning it over is even a bigger bezoin. So therefore, we less brera, we allow you to turn it over.